Hey guys, so this is my vintage Husqvarna Viking Model 51. It's a full rotary hook machine, front facing hook, that's a straight zigzag and decorative stitch domestic machine that accomplishes that via cams that you put in the back. This one's a little bit more modern than most of the machines that I collect. It's probably late 50s, early 60s. I don't know the exact date on it. Typically I go for basically the cast iron machines only. My preference being for really like the 30s to maybe early 50s. But I picked this one up because it had all of the characteristics of a machine that I look for, in that it has a full rotary hook, it has straight zigzag stitch, everything's accessible, external motor, cast iron body, and metal parts on everywhere. That's really important. As you start getting into more modern models, everything starts moving towards plastic. So you see this one does have some plastic parts on it, but really they're not of any real detriment to the overall function of the machine. So you have plastic knobs here, but all the internal parts that are all high wear parts are all steel. So I figured I'd do a video on it. I don't think there's a video on YouTube on this particular model, let alone some of these vintage Vikings, but so I thought I would do one. So this one's actually made in Sweden, and it's like in phenomenal shape. So I just figured, let me first do like a little overview of just some of the features, then I'll go into sewing on it so you can see some of the details. So it has a removable nose plate via hinge here. It's hinged. And the presser foot pressure is all internal. This makes it just really easy to get to everything, because you have to oil the needle bar and some of these other internal components, so that makes it easy. It has the tension dial marked, easy to read. That's one of the benefits of some of these plastic ones, is that they can really mold in the numbers so they're more visible than some of the vintage style where it's like really difficult to see where you're at. This is the zigzag or needle position, and also your cam stitch option. How you choose between the different cam options, because each cam comes with 5 different stitches. So this is center needle, left position, and right position. So you can adjust that. This is your stitch width or the stitch length. Sorry, and unlike a lot of the machines you'll see that have levers, this one's actually a push button reverse, and I like it actually. It's kind of a cool thing. It's always locked into place, and it's just really quick to actuate. The bottom here, this is the stitch width, so on your zigzag or on your decorative stitches. And also this little knob here on the top, it has a little stop, so if you're doing buttonholes, you can push that in and adjust where the stop goes. This also has feed dog drop, so if you're doing darning or free motion embroidery, you turn that knob and it'll drop the feed dogs. And the feed dogs, speaking of the feed dogs, these are some well-designed feed dogs. So they have a lot of the vintage style in that they almost have like these backward-facing teeth that are real grabby, which are good for feeding material. So you'll notice a lot of these vintage machines will feed material through so much better than a lot of the modern ones, and that's because they have, or in part because of these aggressive feed dogs. These are almost like industrial feed dogs. And you'll see they have a row on each side, a row in the back, and then a row on the front, which not a lot of the domestic ones have. It's a low shank machine, so it uses any modern low shank foot, and then the needle size is a 15x1 or 705H. Any of the it's basically the common domestic standard now, and it has the attachment holes there. And this is cool too. It's got a flip up slide. They call this a slide plate normally on because it slides, but it's got a flip up plate to access the bobbin. And this is maybe one of my only machines that have a vertical hook, where you can actually grab the bobbin and remove it from the top. Most of them you need to tilt them back, like on a 1591. It can just be a challenge to get to them. So that's, and it's under spring tension too, so that's cool. Yeah, and let me just keep going around. So this is the bobbin winder, And the bobbin winder mechanism is neat. So there's nothing here. So you basically wind across down to the tension up to your bobbin. And the bobbin is I'd say it's comparable to a size 66 bobbin. It's smaller than the class 15, but about the size of a 66 or like a Foth bobbin or something. So you put the bobbin on and then you push it in. And when you push it in, it disengages this drive shaft. So you don't have to worry about the needle moving. It completely disengages it. It's not a friction system, it's geared. So, and then you just run and wind your bobbin. It doesn't automatically disengage. So you just keep an eye on it. Once it's wound, it winds really fast because it's geared. And then you just stop, take your bobbin off, and give that a little pull out, and it will re-engage this drive shaft and disengage the bobbin winder. So it's neat. So there's no... Typically on these vintage machines, you'll have a friction disc here that you have to tighten down. It doesn't have that. Standard motor mount, just like any of the other vintage machines. It's got all your oil ports here. It has an external motor, which I actually looked for that. I don't know why people don't necessarily like it for whatever reason. I think they feel like it clutters the machine, but your options for being able to work on it and upgrade it in the future if something breaks is just so much greater on these external motors. So I prefer it. Dual thread stand here, because you can run this dual needle, and I'll show you in a second how. And it has the door here that swings out to access the cam. And the cam is basically just this little lever here. You lower it and then you pull the cam out and you can change these cams, which are neat. So that is that. And the light on it, as you can probably see, it's an internal light. And this gives a lot more visibility than the standard ones. You can see it hinges down for easy changing. It's wide open so it doesn't get hot. You're not going to touch that and get burned. It's a lot of ventilation through there. And then the switch is right up here. So easy to put on and off, and you have a lot better visibility than having the light mounted on the back like a lot of vintage machines. So, so that's kind of like this, the 360 at the top. Let me throw the machine back in the tripod and I'll show you the underside and kind of some of the design elements here that make this unique. So it fits standard Singer cabinets. The dimensions of the bed are the same. So you can see here it's driven by, it's very basic design here. They really simplified this down. There's not a lot of moving parts, which make maintenance a lot easier. And everything that is there is robust. So you can see it has a cleated nylon belt. And just keep an eye on these. There were some Adlers that had the cleated nylon belts that had problems. This one's newer. I'm not so worried about it. And you can see it's a light color, so you can be pretty confident there's not going to be any problems. But if you're going to go look at one of these, rotate fully the hand wheel and watch this belt. See if there's any fraying or any degradation in the belt, because if there is, you might want to pass on it. I'm not sure about the availability of these belts. And here's the lower drive shaft, and you can see it goes to a forward-facing hook, which is gear. It's a gear in here that drives the hook, and that's it. Super basic. Everything's steel, heavy duty here. Forward-facing hook, so you can run 2 needles and do parallel stitching with this, whereas on some of the other models you can't. Like on a Necky, you can't run 2 needles. And some of the other ones where the hook is facing the side of the machine, you can't run dual needle. So it's got a forward-facing hook, so you can run dual needle. And then, yeah, I mean, that's basically it. Super clean on the bottom. I mean, you look at some of these other machines, like, they can get really cluttered, whereas this is just pretty clean. It was rewired, or I did rewire it, so look at the wiring. The wiring for the light runs internal, so just inspect it. You can change it. It's not that tough, but just be mindful of that, especially on these old vintage steel machines. I've had a Singer 201 that just shocked me pretty bad when I was messing with it, because just the wiring breaks down over time. Anyway, so let me sew on it so you can see how it performs. So like I said, it's a cam the machine should come with cams. If you're going to go find one, make sure it has the cams. I don't know about the availability of these cams. There's 3 of them, an A, a B, and a C. And you can see they're stepped. And check, because these are probably made out of Bakelite, so they're going to be a little bit more brittle. Just make sure they're not chipped. Then really the most important, I would say, of the cams, of the A, B, and C, would be the A cam. And the A cam has all of your utility stitches. So it has your zigzag stitch, it has your blind stitch, your 3-step zigzag stitch. So I would say that's the most critical of the 3. But there also is this wheel that will give you the settings that you need to accomplish a particular stitch. So let's say you want to do a standard zigzag. It'll tell you use cam A, and then where to put the settings. If you want to do a decorative, or maybe say the blind stitch, you use cam A, setting 1, stitch, or setting 2, stitch width 1, and stitch 4. So that's good to have. If it comes with it, that's great. If not, just experiment and see which ones accomplish what. And then on the back of this, it has for dual needle. So it'll tell you, it's basically the same thing as the front. It's just giving you a visual reference for what those parallel stitches would look like. So this is, if you can find it with this, it's a great thing to have. And then you have the 2 cams, or the 3. There should be 3. So I'll show you how it sews. It's actually really impressive. I've used a lot of machines, and I'd say this is up there with probably top 5 machines that I've used in terms of its smoothness, strength. I mean, a lot of these, as long as they have these higher powered motors, greater than 1 amp motors, and so they're going to have penetrating power. Feeding capability is obviously good. I have a bunch of feet with it too, but I only use a handful of feet, so I'll just leave this. This is actually an open-toed, I think it might even be a satin stitch foot. And the difference being that the satin stitch has a tunnel that runs through the center that allows the mound of fabric to pass through. So let me turn that light off, see if that improves. Yeah, okay. So I'll just show you, yeah, so this is some cotton, just straight cotton. Just figured I'd just run through it so you can see. So this is straight stitch, and you can see it goes slow, you can go fast. I mean, that's really fast. That's like on par with, I'd say, my Adler 189, which is a really fast machine. And you can see the stitches on this are super balanced. So that's the straight stitch. Go back and I'll do, let's bump it up to setting 5, which is your standard zigzag. Raise the needle up, set it to the widest zigzag, and then we'll shorten it. Now the thing with the stitch length adjustment, which is nice on this, and this is unique to this machine. So it's a rotary dial, so you can really dial in your stitch widths, or your stitch lengths. But as you go down below 1, and as you get down between, I'd say 25% of this dial is dedicated between 1 and 0. So this will give you a lot finer adjustment as you work down towards these satin stitches and these really close stitches, especially the decorative ones, where you really want to be able to dial it in. So this will give you a lot finer control when you're dialing in that stitch width for those decorative stitches, which is unique to this machine. I think it's a huge benefit, because you try to make those small adjustments on, say, something like a FOF 130, and it's really tough. So that is a nice thing. So that's, here's some decorative stitches. So let me, I don't even know what stitches I was doing. I have to reference the chart. See, it's fast and it's smooth. So let me zoom in. This, I guess, is, I don't even know, it's some kind of decorative stitch. Let's tighten that up. So that would be your blind stitch. I'm doing it really short, so let me lengthen it out. So on this blind stitch, if you're like hemming clothes and stuff, so it does like 4 straight stitches and then it zigzags over. And this is basically the stitches that you're going to be using are blind stitch, zigzag, and straight. Those are the only stitches I use, and I have all kinds of machines with all different stitch capabilities. You never use them unless you're doing, you know, decorative quilting stuff. I mean, that's not something I do. Maybe it's something you do, so it's important, but for me, it's not a huge factor. So that's the blind stitch. And then let's see what the next one is. And you can adjust it on the fly. There we go, 3. So that is a... Oh, I just broke the thread, and I'll show you why. This is why I hate these spools. These Gutermans. I should be using a thread cone stand. So I just broke the thread, and I'm like thinking, well, what happened? And this has happened on other machine videos. See how the thread dropped down and wound around the spool? So that's a problem. I would suggest against those unless you're going to use a spool stand. So that can be frustrating. Let me re-thread it real quick. Threading's pretty straightforward. A couple guides and you thread it front to back. Let me thread it. Okay. Yeah, and you could see where the tension started getting really high on here. So you see how this started pulling up? So you could see it started getting really tight back here. So, you know, that's the thing is this thread will stretch, so and then it'll break. But so let's do that one again. So you can see that's an actual 3-step zigzag. So it's 3 straight stitches as you're going back and forth. So you have that. Then your next one is 4, which is like a decorative stitch. So if you on something like that, you would do a really close stitch width. And you can change the needle position to change how that decorative stitch looks. So you can see that's like a decorative one. I don't know, like probably see that like around the perimeter of like a napkin or something. So yeah, and there's a thread cutter on the actual presser foot bar, which is cool. But you can see the stitches are all really good. They're all balanced. And this will do a lot more. So this is 4 layers. It's 8. It'll go through 12 layers of you know, this is Kona cotton, so it's thicker cotton. No problem. So let's do a zigzag. That's super close. So let's widen that out. Say if you're going to do thick material like this, you're probably using it in a utility application, in which case you'd want a wider spacing of your stitches. So yeah, it just flies through that, and that's thick. And then just straight stitch, left position, right position, oops, center position. So, and then when you look at the stitch quality on something that thick, you can see the stitches are super balanced. This is the bottom, but you wouldn't be able to tell that if you were just looking. So that's what you really want to look for. And there's no like puckering here in the seam or anything, so this looks really good. And it'll do leather too. I wouldn't suggest it, but just to kind of demonstrate. So this is some thicker leather. I don't know about the exact thickness, but this is thicker than garment weight leather, but this is like upholstery style stuff. So this is 2 layers on a straight stitch. I mean, it just goes through it. That's 2 layers. We'll do 3 in a second. On a zigzag. you know, that looks, I mean, you can't beat that, really. Stitch quality and penetrating power and everything. So let's go 3 layers. I would never normally do this on one of my machines. Like, to me, this is abusing the machine. And this isn't what I would use this machine for, but just to kind of show you what it can do. And that's zigzag, and then we'll go straight too. So back to straight. And then reverse. Straight again. So it'll feed, that's the thing about these aggressive feed dogs, is it'll feed that thick of material through. I mean, that's like a yardstick thickness, more maybe. And it'll feed it through. So this is why these feed dogs are so great, is feeding that heavy material. And then of course it has the stronger motor, so it has the penetrating power. And stitches look good. So I don't know, if you happen to run across one of them, I would say this is as good, if not better, than the majority of vintage machines you'll find. It has a lot of the characteristics that I look for. You know, a lot of similarities between, say, something like a FOF 130 or a Nicky, or, you know, some of these other really highly rated vintage machines. You know, it's belt driven, cleated belt, fully gear driven, full rotary hook, forward facing, so you can use dual needle. The profile of it is minimalist, because the light is actually in the arm here as opposed to being in the nose of the machine. So you don't have this bulk here like you would get on other machines that have the light embedded into the head, into the nose. And everything's steel on this, so you're not going to have to worry about parts, you know, internal parts wearing or breaking. The motor's external, so you can always upgrade that down the line. The brushes on the motor are accessible externally, so that makes changing the brushes out easy. So I don't know, I really like the machine. It wasn't something that I necessarily thought I would go for, you know, 2 years ago, but after, you know, using a lot of machines, I kind of knowing what I'm looking for, this is definitely a good one. So if you run across it, keep it in mind. I think it might be a better option than a lot of the other machines out there. So there it is, the Husqvarna Viking, made in Sweden. Definitely an awesome one. So if you find one, grab it. All right, guys. Thanks.